Hello and welcome to a video with me, Raindell, and today we're taking a look at the damage formulas within War of the Vision to help you better understand which vision card will provide more damage to your units, among other things. This is the 7th episode of the Noob Corner, and as always, if you have other topics that you'd like me to cover in the future, let me know. It'll be a pleasure for me to make those. So let's jump right in. So today, the first thing I want to talk about is the wotv.info website. That's where we'll be using the infographic that they created for physical damage. And it's honestly a website with a lot of really nice resources. So if you haven't been using it, I recommend you take a look. Among other things, there's stat index for the units with the most accuracy, evasion, agility, and whatnot. They have some guides that they publish once in a while. But mainly, I love their tools section. Where they have farm calculators, equipment builders, damage calculators that they've made. So quite a few useful tools for people. And then they have infographic explaining status effects, explaining damage, which is the one we'll take a look at today, and a couple of other really nice things. So yeah, go take a look at their website. It is worth the time. So now let's take a look at damage. And the main reason why I'm using this is because they've explained it in a really clear fashion using this infographic right here. And the way damage is calculated, there's a lot of different steps, and you kind of need to understand those in order to know how to build your units better. So the first thing that's taken into account is the total attack that your unit currently have when they're going to attack. That is for physical damage. If you were doing a magic attack, it would instead be your magic stat. So that's the first thing that comes into account. Then it's what they call the skill bonus, and every single class has a list of the stats that influence their own damage. In the game, when you're using a skill from a class, it has a set of modifiers that influence basically the damage that they're going to do. So if we take a look at Ranger, for example, they have a primary attack scaling. So that means 100% of their attack is going to be used. But then they will also use 15% of the unit's dexterity and 5% of the unit's luck, if you look at those. And those also come in. So when you're using a Ranger ability, you do get a little bit more damage from having high luck and high dex, but still the attack scaling is the most important part of it. And every single class has different ways that they leverage dexterity, luck, and agility in their damage calculations. So you can take a look at that on their website. That's the second step. So that's not it's not something you can influence. Every job has their own, but it's nice to know that luck, for example, could give you a little bit of extra damage. Then the third step is the skill multiplier. And that's really where you start being able to boost your damage. So every ability in the game, even basic attacks, have a set modifier. Depending on the ability, basic attacks are typically a modifier of 0.7. So that means when you're doing your basic attack, you take 0.7 times your attack score and then apply it to damage. Some abilities go all the way to a modifier of 2 times and 2.6 times in some cases. So it's what influences how hard you're hitting. And it's multiplied. If you were to hit with you have an attack of 1000 and you're doing a basic attack, you're gonna hit for 700 because the basic attack has a modifier of 0.7. Now, from that point, the modifier is influenced by killers, slash attack up, any kind of modifier that you get in your vision cards that influences this damage type, or modifiers from your weapon being a +5. So if we go back to Frederica using a Razalgethi +5, this gun will have a +15 missile attack. So that means every missile attack that she performs will have 15 more missile attacks. So if she were to do a basic attack, as we said, basic attacks have a modifier of 0.7. But with a +5 Razalgethi, she now has 15 missile attack, and that's added to the modifier of every missile attack she does. So now, instead of doing 0.7, she would have 0.85, and her basic attack will do 85% of her attack score instead. So with that, you can add then Frederica's Dream, which gives her 10 lightning attack and 35 missile attack. So that pushes the modifier even more. Now she'll be using a higher percentage of her attack, and etc. So every modifier to damage that you add is added to the damage in an addition or subtraction fashion. So we're talking math here a little bit, but it is really, really powerful because it is then multiplied with your attack. So you kind of benefit from increasing both. Then after that, you have your maximum amount of damage, basically. And we're going to start deducting from that using defense or spirit in the case of magic attack. And the way a defense or spirit works is for every point of defense, you reduce damage by 1%, basically. So if the target has 50% defense, you'll deal half damage. And the same applies for spirit. And then if you have some defense penetration, well, you ignore a percentage of that defense. So say the target has 50% defense, and we have 10% defense penetration. We're going to ignore 10% of their defense, meaning their defense against our attack is now 45. So they're reducing our damage a little bit less. Then we calculate the resistances to our damage type and then our element. So if we're using Frederica and our target has 50% missile resistance, well, they're reducing our damage by half. If they have lightning resistances on top of that, they further reduce that damage. And these resistances are applied in a percentage fashion as well. So after you've reduced your damage from their defense, you will then reduce their damage from missile resistance and elemental resistances, or increase your damage from those weaknesses if they have any. After that, bravery or faith comes in. The more bravery you have, the harder your physical attacks hit. The more faith you have, the harder your magical attacks hit. And that really plays into the total damage because it's calculated at the very end of the calculations. So it's kind of the final thing that can influence your damage positively. And then finally, the elemental advantage or disadvantage comes in. So if you're hitting a target, if you're Frederica, and you're hitting a water target, you'll deal 25% more damage. And if you're Frederica and you're getting hit by a Kilfei who's Earth type, she will deal 25% less damage to you. So that's applied at the very end of the calculations, and it's the final thing that comes into it. So there we go. I hope having a visual support helps with understanding that. Okay, so we took a look at the way damage is calculated. It's pretty heavy, so I recommend if you want to try to get used to that, take a look at that infographic once again and try to make your own calculation once or twice. See if you're getting to the same result the game is, and then you'll understand a little bit better what to prioritize in your builds in the future and how having a +5 weapon, for example, is good, or how much damage you actually get from having that kind of gear. So for that purpose, I've made a little test here that I called Which is Better for Frederica. And we'll only be taking a look at the party and individual ability, not the stats from each cards, because that would make it much more complicated to explain. And I want to keep this video rather short. So let's take a look. For Frederica, Ifrit would give her 50% more attack. Or Frederica's Dream would give her 35 more missile attack and 10 more lightning attack. So looking at this here, we might think that improving attack would lead to a higher damage boost. But in fact, it is Frederica's Dream which provides the most damage if you look at both things. So why is that? Let's say that our Frederica is fully built and has a total attack of 700. Well, the first thing to know is that vision cards like Ifrit give a stat increase based on the percentage of the unit's base stats and not their total stats. So it's not her 700 attack that would be increased by 50%, but rather her base attack, which is of 266. So Ifrit, maxed out, would give her 133 more attack. So over her total of 700, that's an increase of 19%, and it would directly translate to damage, which means that all her attacks would deal 19% more damage. In the case of Frederica's Dream, it's a little bit more complicated. What's going to happen is, now that she has this equipped, she has a total of 45, so 0.45, that is going to be added to the modifier of all her lightning and missile type attacks, which are basically every single one of her abilities. So 0.45 times her total of 700 attack means an extra 315 damage that's going to be added to all her attacks. Now, could Ifrit provide her with more than 315 damage? Possibly. As we've said, her attack with Ifrit would increase by 133. So if she were to use an ability with a total modifier of 3.0, for example, then this 133 attack would actually do 400 more damage because it would be applied 3 times. So depending on the total modifier, Ifrit could end up giving a lot more. But in the game, attacks don't really get all the way to 3-time multiplier unless you already have things like Frederica's Dream equipped, a +5 weapon, and etc. And that's why I want to end it with having extra attack and extra modifier at the same time is the best way to boost your damage, because on one side you're boosting the base thing that's going to be multiplied, and on the other side you're increasing by how much it's going to be multiplied. And having both of those means that you're going to send your damage through the roof. So I've mentioned skill modifiers a couple times now. And there are ways to check skill modifiers to know a little bit more about what I'm talking about. And for that, I recommend you go on the wotv.info website. And if you're not using it already, it's a really great resource. It has data mined information on all the units, vision cards, Zispers, basically everything data mined about War of the Vision is in there. So if we take a look at Frederica, because I've been referring to her a little bit, and in the skills section over here, we can see percentages next to most of her abilities, and these are the skill modifiers. So if we were to use, for example, Vital Shot, it begins when the skill is at level 1 at a 1.3 modifier, and when the skill is at level 20, it is a 1.65. So it will use 1.65 times her attack score. If you're using Frederica's Dream, then that goes, that modifier is increased additively. So yeah, this is how you can check the modifier and then make calculations ahead of time. So that was it. I don't want to go in much deeper in this video. I think it's already pretty heavy in terms of math. Let me know what you thought. Would you like me to do a couple more examples of this, or was that clear enough for you? And then, as always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of those kind of videos in the future, and then have a great rest of your day.